Greetings and salutations, future diplomats. This week we will be going through our 8th exercise list. And this week I've decided to go a bit easier on you guys. I'm going back to more international relations related topics. And today we are going to talk a little bit about the current state of affairs in the world with an article by international relations theorist John Eikenberry, which you guys might know from some of your international politics classes. He's a liberal institutionalist, if you guys remember that theory of international relations. And he's going to talk. He has this article on in the International Affairs publications, which was, I think, published in January or February this year. It talks a little bit about where the liberal order is heading, especially after the Trump election and Brexit, and how is the US-led liberal order going to behave in the next couple of years? Will it end? Will it transform? Will it? What will happen? Will it adapt to Trump? Will it survive Trump? And all of these questions, which are pretty interesting as well. It's nice to see a international relations theorist make these forecasts for international relations in the next couple of years. And then in the second text, we have a text about the WTO, about commerce, easy text as well from the 2016 exam. As you will see, I think this week's exercise list is a bit more straightforward than last week's, which was a bit more, I would say, a bit more literature-oriented, with comparisons between George Orwell and the current position of China in the world. I think last week's exercise list and this week's, they have a lot to do with each other, because China, as many people think, will be the new the new leader of the liberal order. Oddly enough, China, a communist country, will be, some analysts say, will be the new caretaker of this liberal international order. As ironic as that sounds. All right, so let's get down to it. A very simple text in my view, which has some good observations and some good vocabulary for you guys to use in your international politics exams as well. So question number 1. Considering the content of text 1, decide whether the following statements are right or wrong. Right? Item number 1. John Eikenberry contends that the liberal order depends solely on U.S. leadership. And this one is incorrect. What John Eikenberry is saying is that there has been, since the end of World War II, a liberal order which was led by the United States. But he doesn't say necessarily that the survival of the liberal order depends solely or only on the United States. He says that it might survive here, especially at the end. It might survive if there's a new configuration of global power, a new coalition of states, new governance of institutions. So if, for instance, China takes over, the liberal order might still exist, only in a different, in a more adapted way, not U.S.-led, but still the institutions, the United Nations systems, the WTOs, all of the institutions and regimes created after post-World War II, the Yalta system would still be there, despite the U.S. not being a leader anymore. Of course, there will be some adaptations of the system without the U.S. there, but he doesn't necessarily see the end of the whole entire system if there is a lack of U.S. leadership. Okay, so he's a bit more optimistic than some other analysts. Okay, it doesn't depend solely on the U.S. Okay, the U.S. created such a stable and ingrained system in international relations that it's difficult for it to crumble completely. Okay, the Pax Americana, if you will. So that one, number one, is wrong. And sorry for the noise here. It's a bit warm where I am right now, so I need to. The fan needs to be working, or else I won't be able to survive. Okay. So sorry for the inconvenience. All right. I am number two. Current U.S. leadership intends to withdraw from its historical role in international politics. And this is correct. This is pretty straightforward. Current U.S. leadership, being Donald Trump, his presidency, his administration, is giving all the signs that he wants to retreat from the global scene, from its previous leadership in the world. For instance, adopting more protectionist policies against the liberal trade doctrine that the U.S. has been following since at least the end of the Second World War. Uh, the U.S. is also not participating in a global trade pacts such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The U.S. is no longer, as they perceive, the moral high ground of the world. Trump doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to participate in wars based on principles anymore, just based on pragmatic needs. So the U.S. is kind of relinquishing a little bit of its leadership role in the world with Trump. Okay, so this one is pretty correct. This one, as I was saying in some previous classes, some of these questions can be answered solely on your knowledge of international relations or your background knowledge on something. Just by knowing international politics, you could answer these questions, most of them here, without even reading the text. So this can buy you time, a lot of time in the exam. Of course, always read the text, but if you're pressed for time, some of these questions you can answer solely, or if you're comfortable, solely on the question itself. You don't even have to go back to the text. All right. Let's go to item number 3. Before 1930, the U.S. presidents were generally hostile towards liberal internationalism. And this you can know by the two ways. One, you can remember your classes from history. I remember Woodrow Wilson, and you will see that he was one of the founding fathers of liberalism, of international liberalism, and he was before 1930, and he was a U.S. president. So you would see there, this would be wrong just based on history. But if you go back to the text, you will see he doesn't say, it's extrapolating because he doesn't say anything about the presidents before 1930. He's saying that for the first time since the 1930s, the United States has elected a president who's actually hostile to liberal internationalism. It doesn't say anything before. So you cannot make any assumptions about anything that happened before 1930. So in this case, for that alone, it will be wrong. But you can also use your background knowledge in history to confirm that it is wrong, because you would remember Woodrow Wilson, one of the founding fathers of liberalism, and he was president during World War I, way before 1930. So this one is very incorrect. Number 4, this one has a bit of a twisted language to it. Sometimes they do have some items which are poorly written in the exam, and it might confuse some of the candidates. But in this, and usually those ones are correct, those items, but the language is so contorted that it confuses a lot of candidates, and they have a tendency to mark it wrong when it's correct, actually. In this case, is one of those cases. Item number 4, Brexit is one of the challenges that Europe faces when one analyzes the sustainability of the post-war liberal order. And this is correct. The John Eikenberry here, if you read his text, says that simultaneously, Britain's decision to leave the EU and a myriad of other troubles besetting Europe appear to mark an end to the long post-war project of building a greater union. So, of course, Brexit is one of the challenges or troubles that besetting Europe at this moment. But there was also a myriad of other troubles, which he doesn't go into a lot. But here in the text, he says that there are other troubles other than Brexit, which are uh, making it more difficult for Europe to 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 continue to sustain this the post-war integration project that they were building with the help of the United States, of course, in the framework of the liberal international order. Okay, so this one is right there. This is correct. Okay. So recapping here, question one. Question one, we have item number one. Correct. No, item number one, incorrect. I'm sorry. Item number two, correct. Item number three, incorrect. And item number four, correct. Question number two. Based on the ideas expressed, grammar, and the vocabulary of text one, decide whether the following statements are right or wrong. It can be inferred, always. Alarm bell should sound when you read the word inferred. It can be inferred from the text that the author perceives the emergence of anti-democratic regimes in some countries in Central Europe and Asia as a novel phenomenon. Okay, and this one is incorrect. It tries to trick you a little bit because it talks about Central Europe and Asia, and if you read in the text, you see Hungary, Poland, and the Philippines, and Turkey, and you would say, oh yeah, Central Europe, Asia, it's there. And he does talk about new authoritarianism. So that means, yeah, that must be something new, but not necessarily because of the quotation marks. From the quotation marks, you can infer that the author, John Eikenberry, doesn't believe, he's using it in an ironic sense, that he doesn't believe that these regimes are new at all. He's questioning the novelty of these authoritarianisms because he's remembering, he's making a call to the 1930s fascist regimes of Europe, which popped up in some of these same countries. And also Turkey before during the Young Turks movement, which was very authoritative in the beginning of the 20th century. And also the Philippines also had an authoritarian regime with Marcos, and back in the latter half of the 20th century. So he's saying that these authoritative regimes existed before as well. He's alluding to that, and it's not necessarily something new. This is what he sees as one of the troubles of the international liberal order, is because you see old regimes, pre-liberal regimes, making their way back into mainstream politics, which he sees as a problem. So you cannot necessarily say it's a novel regime just by reading the text, specifically because of the quotation marks. Okay. All right, so number one is incorrect. Question number two, item number two. For some, a simple change in administration in the administration, but okay, I'll let it slide. In the US will take the international liberal order out of its current malaise. Okay, so basically here is saying that if a new president is elected, a more internationalist president the international liberal order would be restored to the way it was before Trump was elected and before uh, this current crisis in the order. And yes, as you see here, some, it's a point of view of some, the keyword here, some observers see a crisis of American hegemonic leadership. For 70 years, international labor has been tied to American power, currency, and leadership. Here. Sorry, I was reading the other one. With new political leadership and renewed economic growth, the liberal order could bounce back. Okay, so uh, some do think that, I didn't say most, I didn't say the majority or anything else, just some observers think that the liberal order might bounce back just by a mere simple change of leadership if Trump leaves, for instance. But most think there's a fundamental change because they would argue that the liberal order has been challenged for quite some time now, since the emergence of China, of India, of new power blocks in the world has shifted economic power and some political and military power away from the United States. So that's something deeper. It's not just because of Trump. So most of them would say that there's something fundamental going on. There's a transition going on in the order. Okay, and that brings us to, so number 2 is incorrect. Incorrect. It's correct. Sorry. Number 1 is incorrect. Number 2 is correct. And that will lead us into item number 3, where others support the idea that the whole post-war order is in jeopardy. Okay. And I would put this as incorrect because they don't say that the whole post-war war order is in jeopardy. Remember that Eikenberry is a bit of an optimist. They would say that the order is in transition. So we're going from a U.S.-led liberal order to another liberal order where we have new governments, new coalitions of states, and new institutions. Okay, the liberal order will give way to a new configuration of global power, new coalitions, and new states. And the key word here is this: the U.S.-led political foundation of the liberal order, not the whole liberal order itself. There might be another liberal order without the U.S. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily mean that the liberal order will crumble. Okay, it means that it's transitioning into another type of liberal order, or might be something else, but not necessarily the complete and utter obliteration of the liberal order. Okay, so this one is incorrect because of that. Okay, number 3, incorrect. Moving on to item number 4. John Eikenberry is concerned that liberalism will not flourish without the U.S. backing. Okay, and this is incorrect. This is again exactly what I said before. The liberal order has been, of course, backed by the U.S. Since the end of World War II, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's only liberal order if the U.S. is backing it. There could be another liberal order where, for instance, China is the leader of it, is backing the liberal order. China might be, don't be confused, that China is a communist regime within China, but internationally, it can be perceived, it can support a liberal order where free market, and especially in the economic side, and free market can flourish, okay, without the U.S. backing. And China has not meddled too much into the politics of other countries, not too much as the U.S. has. So it could be conceivable that there is a liberal order sustained by China where countries can be democratic and liberal, free traders, while in China itself is an authoritative communist regime. So those two things can coexist, according to Eikenberry. All right. So this one is incorrect. All right. So recapping here. Number 1 is incorrect. Number 2 is correct. Number 3, incorrect. Number 4, correct. Incorrect, I'm sorry. Number 4, incorrect. All right. Question number 3, bearing in mind the language used in text 1, judge right or wrong the following items. Number 1, the would-be setting written in bold type could be changed to would-be lingering without affecting, this is incorrect here, affecting, cross out here, put the ing, without affecting the meaning of the sentence. And this one is correct. Besetting means that there's a nuisance or there's a trouble that is constantly, persistently attacking someone or something. Like for instance, there might be I would say the threat of authoritative regimes is besetting Europe. It's constantly rearing its ugly head in European politics. There's always a extreme right-wing party or left-wing party who's always vying for power, who sometimes gets votes, and sometimes nationalistic policies start cropping up again. So it's something that is always besetting Europe, which is also the same meaning as beleaguering. This is also constantly threatening the stability of Europe. Okay, almost like a what do you say, a persistent ace, almost stalking in that sense. All right, Europe is a solemn bastion of the the international liberal order. And this basically was a disguised vocab question as an reading interpretation question, but basically it was a vocab question. I wanted to see if you knew. The question was testing your knowledge of the word bulwark, which is here. The uncertainties of Europe as the quiet bulwark of the wider liberal international order have global significance. Okay, and the word of the meaning bulwark is exactly that, the bastion. It's the fortress. It's the protector of the international liberal order. Europe has always been, alongside the United States, a protector. Europe has been more of a quiet protector. It doesn't have the same military power as the US, but it has more softer power that it tries to protect through soft power the international liberal order. I think this is what he was saying. With the assistance, the military hard power assistance of the US. That's why it's the quiet bulwark. So in this sense, I basically just use synonyms of the word quiet and bulwark to make this this question here, this item. So yes, Europe is the solemn, quiet, peaceful, tranquil bastion or bulwark, protector of the international liberal order. So this one is correct. All right, so correct. Item number 3, question number 3. According to the text, there has been a proliferation of regimes which deny any link with mainstream politics. This one is very poorly written and a bit confusing, and I would say it's incorrect as well. This is incorrect. This one was trying to test your knowledge of especially the authoritarian regimes and these fringe movements which are now gaining power in Europe. And I wanted to actually test you with the expression backlash politics. here in item number 3, and the idea that these regimes, um, they are in power because all of them countered, attacked traditional politicians, which is mainstream politics. This is sort of the case of Donald Trump, even though he was part of a mainstream political movement, which is the Republican Party. He attacked all traditional politics and everything else, which is now very in vogue. Uh, but not all of them, here, as I say, deny any link with mainstream politics. Some of them are very mainstream politicians who have gone the nationalist route. For instance, the Tory movement in the United Kingdom, which not James Cameron himself, but the Tory party did support Brexit in some way or form, especially now the current Prime Minister, Theresa May. So, and they are very mainstream politicians. So uh, there hasn't been necessarily proliferation regimes of regimes that have deny any link with mainstream politics. You have the Tories, even the Donald Trump is part of the Republican Party, even though he does say a lot against traditional Washington politicians. He's now a Washington politician. Okay, so number 3 is incorrect. Number 4, the word backlash written in bold type can correctly be replaced by retaliation without altering the meaning of the sentence. And this one is correct. This is the definition of word backlash. Backlash means that you do something and then you fear backlash. You fear that somebody's going to retaliate, going to do something. So uh, the uh, some people in Great Britain think that because of Brexit, there might be backlash from Europe. The EU might want to retaliate and deny them any access to European markets or deny them freedom of movement and backlash like this because they chose to leave the European Union. So some in Great Britain might fear some backlash. Okay, so this one is correct. So number 1 is correct. Number 2 is correct. Number 3 is incorrect. Number 4 is correct. Okay, let me see if I did this right here. Yep, I put correct. All right, moving on to text number 2. This one is pretty straightforward, talking about international trade and the role of diplomats, of diplomatic intervention, and about and also the role of technicians, of technical trade specialists, and what's the relationship between both. All right, this is a pretty straightforward text as well. And as you will see, some of the questions you can read, you can answer without even reading the text, just when your basic knowledge of international trade. That you need to know a lot for the exam. Okay. Based on text 2, decide whether the statements below are right or wrong. There has never been any conflict between the members of the WTO. And this one, you don't even have to read the text. Well, you know this is incorrect. That there's never been a conflict between any members of the WTO. Well, I have at least 30 in mind. If you want to list, this one is definitely incorrect. It's key. Okay. And here, in question number 4, item number 2. Trade disputes can be categorized into at least 3 facets. Okay, let's go back to the text. And this one is correct. Even it numbers it for you. However, disputes arise and they fall into 3 main categories here. Conflicts of policy between sovereign governments, which then have an impact on their mutual trade and investment. Disputes Number two, disputes over practical trade actions which are initiated by governments or get escalated to the intergovernmental level. And three, disputes over the proper application to trade of internationally agreed standards in broader policy areas like environmental protection or labor conditions. Right there, so you have three facets or three categories. I think they were just testing your knowledge of the word category. So number four, number four, item number two, correct. And number three, again, so this is to show you how sometimes the first phase exam can be very, very straightforward, and I would dare say easy sometimes. If you compare these to my questions that I did, these are pretty straightforward. Right. Of course, there the odd question there is very hard, like the Orlando question of 2015, but most of them are pretty straightforward. You don't have to fear the first phase. Question number four, item number three. Friendly nations are those ones which belong to the WTO. Oh, and this one is incorrect. There's nowhere where in the text where it says this, that in order to be a friendly nations, you have to belong to the WTO. And just by knowing the members of the WTO, you know there, Russia is there, the United States is there, China is there, and there's a lot of nations who are can be seen as actual enemies who belong to the WTO and not necessarily friendly. Okay. And number four, the majority of international trade is carried out free of difficulties. And this one is correct. If you read the text, I forgot where the part was. Okay, this one, yeah. If you know anything about international politics, you will know this one is correct. So if you analyze this question, the whole entire question, the four items, you could theoretically do without even glancing at the text. This is just based on your international politics knowledge. Of course, I do not recommend you do that and off the bat, only if you're very certain. But in this case, this one was one of the questions that you could do without reading the text. This one is pretty straightforward. Okay, so number one is incorrect. Number two is correct. Number three, incorrect. Number four, correct. Okay. Let's go to question number five. Okay. Checking. Question number five. Number one. Disputes on international issues neither demand the intervention of diplomats nor of technical trade experts. Well, this one again, it's pretty straightforward. As disputes on international issues neither demand. So basically, what this is saying is diplomats and specialists are useless in international relations. So you shouldn't take the Huguenot exam because diplomats are useless. Of course, this one is incorrect. Of course, sometimes you need diplomats for the more political aspects of a conflict, of a controversy, and also you need the technicians, the technical experts, to know exactly the nuts and bolts of each agreement to see if it's going to work, if it's going to be practical. All right, so you do need both of them in international relations, especially in international trade. So this one is very incorrect. Like here he says, all such disputes require diplomatic intervention, sometimes by generalist diplomats, but most often by technical trade specialists. Okay, so both of them are needed depending on the situation. Okay. Item number 2, never before, watch out for the word never, some always, all these categorical words. Never before has there been a dispute between the US government and BP. Okay, well, this is incorrect. Never, it's, we're unable to say that there's never been uh, uh, a dispute between the US government and BP. Okay. Uh, some time ago, the most visible trade-related dispute was between the United States government and BP over the disaster non-coulter oil leak in the Gulf of Mexico. All right, so there been a categorical conflict between the U.S. government and BP. The main company involved in the Macondo accident is just by chance based in the UK. And this one is correct. BP is by chance based in the UK. It's not because it's based in the UK that it came into conflict with the US government. It's because the company was by chance based in the UK, and by chance or not, and by chance it was their drill there that leaked in the Gulf of Mexico. That's why they got into a conflict with the US government, not because it was based on the UK, but because it was there by chance. So this one is correct. This is very easy, these two questions. I think SASP should be a bit harder with their English questions. Uh, question number 5, item number 4. Intergovernmental differences of substance are not involved in the case. Okay. This one is correct as well. No intergovernmental difference of substance are at stake. It's right there. This was pretty straight. These two questions were pretty straightforward. This was easy. You guys should have gotten 100% in these two questions. No item should be incorrect. This one is pretty straightforward, very easy. This one was my Easter gift to you guys. And so thank you very much for your patience and your time. We'll be back next week with our ninth exercise list, and we'll go a bit harder than this week. This week was a bit easier. But following our program of literature-based questions, then international politics questions, and then back to more language-based questions, and in this order, we will continue our course, our exercise course, okay? All right, so thank you very much, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you. Have a great day, evening, or night. Bye-bye.